We are awaiting a quorum before we begin. We have a business meeting that we need to attend to, so if you would just give us a couple minutes. Thanks. Good morning. Before we begin today's oversight hearing, we do have some official business that we need to take care of. That's why we've been a little bit delayed waiting on a quorum to arrive. We need to officially welcome a new member to the Committee on Veterans Affairs. As most of you may already know, David Jolly now represents the 13th Congressional District of Florida, which was represented so ably for many years by our good friend, Bill Young. We have vacancies on both the Subcommittee of Health and the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs. We're going to fill those subcommittee vacancies now. You have a copy of the official resolution in your packets. I would note that with Mr. Amadei's departure from the committee, Mr. Jolly's appointment will return DAMA's membership to the agreed upon and committee approved 5-4 ratio, and the Health Subcommittee to the 7-5 ratio. So I now recognize Mr. Bilirakis, Vice Chairman of the committee, for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much. I'd like to offer a resolution adding my good friend David W. Jolly of Florida as a Republican of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs and the Subcommittee on Health.
Their motion to add Congressman David W. Jolly to the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs and the Subcommittee on Health. All in favor will say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Congressman Jolly, welcome to the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, and as is customary, we'd like to afford you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the rest of the committee members. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just make it very brief. I look forward to serving both with you. I've had the opportunity to work with the ranking member as well over the past several years. Two things about my service on this committee. One, we are in this to do right by those who have served, those who have carried the flag, and I look forward to doing that with each of you. And two, I appreciate about this committee its spirit of bipartisanship. So few of the issues that we tackle should be partisan, and this committee is one that recognizes that. I look forward to serving with each and every one of you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, and we are all very glad to have you aboard. And this concludes this business meeting for today. Good morning, and the hearing will now come to order. As the title of today's hearing suggests, we're going to conduct our constitutional oversight duties. VA needs to respond in a timely manner to our request for us to be able to get our job done. With us today is Deputy Secretary Sloan Gibson. I want to note for the record and for the members of this committee, we invited Assistant Secretary Joan Mooney to testify since she is, by title, the Assistant Secretary for Congressional and Legislative Affairs, and as a presidential appointee, she agreed to testify before Congress whenever she was called to do so. Received a communication from her just a little while ago. First of all, I'm shocked she's not in the room. Second of all, she sent me a communication telling me what you, Mr. Secretary, were prepared to answer when she was directed exactly what we were going to be inquiring about. We do not want a 30,000-foot testimony and answers to our questions. We've already done this once. She did a very poor job that day in the hearing and has since done a very poor job. And I think her absence today continues to show her lack of respect to this committee, her constant lateness with providing information that is vital to our constitutional obligation and responsibility, I think is an affront to this committee. It's an affront to the veterans that she purports to support. And I hope that you will take back to her our personal displeasure of her trying to direct where the questions of this committee should go. The fact that we want to get into the weeds on some things is critical because, as you well know, the weeds have grown very tall over the last year or more. So suffice it to say, I ain't happy. For the second time, we're gathered to hear how we can improve a process that too often results in frustration and delay for every member of this committee. I want to start with the positives, because there are positives. Since our last hearing, VA has improved its submission of testimony on time. So that's an area where progress has been made. I mean, there were many times that we did not receive testimony until the night before, sometimes the morning of committee hearings. I'd also like to recognize what I view as a positive tone in your testimony as we have read it about improving the timely response to the requests that this committee makes. You are totally correct in the fact that the Veterans Affairs Committees and the VA have a common duty to ensure that we meet the nation's commitment to its veterans. Unfortunately, long delayed responses for information, documents, or questions continue to plague us. As of Tuesday, the average days pending for all 96 requests was 143, with 66 pending over 60 days and 50 over 100 days. In fact, we have 3 requests pending since 2012, and our oldest outstanding request is 666 days pending. The last time we visited this subject with Assistant Secretary Mooney, she testified regarding the literally thousands of inquiries that VA receives from Capitol Hill. And look, I understand the reality. We all understand the realities. But I have to continue the committee's active oversight of the department. That is our job. As they should, members of the House and the Senate take great interest in VA and its programs because of the missions that it performs. And that's not going to change on my watch. I understand there are a lot of moving parts involving responses to our requests. Many are outside of VA's control, but in the end, it is VA's responsibility to provide Congress with complete, accurate, and timely answers, regardless. Perhaps moving the issue up the chain of command will help improve VA's performance in this area. Mr. Secretary, I thank you for your friendship. I thank you for being here to testify today, and I want to recognize my good friend, the ranking member, Mr. Michaud, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing today. This hearing is about accountability for individual congressional requests and also an opportunity to discuss what can be done to improve the relationship between the VA and this committee. Mr. Gibson, congratulations, first of all, on your recent appointment as Deputy Secretary for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and we appreciate that you're here today as well. And I'm encouraged by the shift in the tone conveyed by your participation in your written testimony. For the first time, the Department has clearly, concisely, and publicly indicated that the status quo must change. Thank you for that open and honest acknowledgement. Also, from your written testimony and your our recent conversation, it appears you, as the Deputy Secretary and the Chief Operating Officer, are taking on the challenge from the Department perspective. I think that will be a significant improvement, and I look forward to working with you in a collaborative and constructive manner. As I've laid out in my discussions with the Secretary, I have 3 basic expectations of the VA about customer service. My first expectation is that VA is responsive to congressional inquiries. While I recognize that our founding fathers' construct of the separation of powers, I also recognize their construct of checks and balances between these separate powers. Oversight is a fundamental power provided to Congress and a fundamental obligation of Congress. Getting the information from the Department is crucial for Congress doing its job. This is not a civics discussion, but directly affects our ability as a co-equal branch of government to do our job. VA's responses to congressional inquiries should be thoughtful, thorough, and complete. Since my recent conversation with Secretary Shinseki, a set of standard operating procedure addresses responsiveness between the committee, Democratic staff, and VA's OCLA has been agreed to and put in place. These appear to be working well so far. I appreciate the VA OCLA's team's willingness to work out those SOPs and adhere to them, and I hold my staff accountable for adhering to our part of that agreement. My second expectation is that VA is timely in its response to congressional inquiries. I recognize that thoughtful, thorough, and complete responses take time. I also recognize that time moves at a different pace in Congress and the VA. This is not a judgment, it's a statement of acknowledgement that our work occurs at different speeds. Reasonable accommodation is somewhat, I believe, in between. When a response is needed and what can be provided by that date, and when a final response will be forthcoming, should be a frequent, routine discussion between our staffs. Since the last transparency hearing held by this committee in September of 2013, we have seen an improvement in the timeliness of VA's testimony submissions and response to congressional inquiries. However, we continue to see substantial delays from 1 to 3 months on a few individual members' inquiries tracked by the committee staff. And I'll defer to those members to discuss their specific inquiries to you directly. It is often difficult to get a straight answer on the reasons for the delay in response. It appears that the lack of timeliness in VA's response to congressional inquiries may in part be cumbersome review process that the department has to go through, both internal and external to the organization preparing the response. This, Mr. Gibson, is likely the toughest part of your challenge to improve the process. However, it behooves everyone involved to that the review and approval process to work collaboratively to change and improve the process. No one benefits from frustrated, dysfunctional relationship between an administration and Congress, least of all our veterans. And my final expectation that the VA allows congressional members and staff direct access to subject matter experts within the department. This means that the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs to facilitate, not control, but to facilitate the interaction between the VA executive and the Hill. For the most part, these interactions, in my opinion, OCL lay roles has, should be transparent to all of us. Our staffs hear informally that the VA subject matter experts want to talk to us. The experts in your department, they really want to talk to us. They want to share the good news and the progress they're making. They believe getting ahead of the bad news is important. They understand that the trust that you mentioned in your written testimony begins with an open, honest communication. We in Congress understand the need and value that your message has to be, consistent. The way to accomplish this is through internal department coordination, not a single filter through OCLA. Politicians know that during a campaign, you try to control the message. During the governing process that comes after the election, which we are through, you need to collaborate around that message. Failing to do so means failure. Just recently, one of my staff members met a young soldier at a professional reception. He was there representing a new Army program to help soldiers transition from active duty. Unable to have a robust discussion about the program at that reception, the soldier agreed to follow up with my staff. Within 1 week, the soldier and my staff exchanged several emails, met once, and set up follow-up meetings for other staff and members. There was no red tape, no DOD or Army legislative affairs intervention, no delays, no complications. That's what I expect from the VA. Just a swift, simple, direct, doing the business that people in the VA I know at that staff level want to do without having to be filtered through OCLA, because that is cumbersome, delays the process, increase frustrations, and also make sure that our veterans doesn't get the services that they need. So, Mr. Gibson, I look forward to your testimony today. I appreciate your testimony and what you had to say in your testimony, and I look forward to hearing what we need to do for both the administration and Congress, how we can build that trust, have that open line of communication, improve our working relationships, because that's what we're here for. I know that's what you're there for, is to do what we can for our veterans. We do not need an administrative bureaucracy over at OCLA that filters the process, that inhibits the ability of the department and this committee to work collaboratively together. And I look forward to your discussion that we're having here today in this very important issue. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back to balance my time.
Thank you very much. As I said earlier, the only witness that we have today before us is Deputy Secretary Sloan Gibson. A little bit of background on Sloan. He graduated in 1975 from West Point and qualified as both an airborne soldier and a ranger, and served as an infantry officer. He holds a master's in economics from the University of Missouri in Kansas City and a master's in public administration from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And following 20 years of service in the banking industry, he served as the president and CEO of the USO for 5 years and was confirmed as Deputy Secretary last February. Secretary Gibson, welcome, and you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I would just like to say that the thoughts and prayers of all of us at VA are with the families that were affected by yesterday's tragic events at Fort Hood. In my prior role, the USO was a critical part of helping that community recover and heal, and I know they'll need a lot of that kind of support again. Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Michaud, other distinguished members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify on VA's ongoing work to provide our congressional partners with timely information. Let me also acknowledge representatives of veteran service organizations in attendance today. Our relationship with VSOs is generally a very positive and productive one. We don't always agree on every issue, but we work through our differences, enabling us to best serve veterans, their families, and our survivors. Just 6 weeks ago, I was privileged to join Secretary Shinseki and more than 340,000 men and women, 1/3 of whom are veterans themselves, who work hard each day to do their best for our nation's veterans. I spent the last 5.5 years doing all I can to support America's service members and military families, and as a veteran and the son and grandson of veterans, I bring that same passion to this opportunity to serve. As I reflect on my first weeks at VA, the learning curve is steep, but it is deeply gratifying work. Next week, I start on an aggressive spring and summer travel schedule to meet with veterans and VA employees, the really most important way to understand veterans' needs and the work our people in the field are doing. What is best for our veterans is what guides all of our work at VA, and that is my singular focus in my role there. That's also what connects VA to the members of this committee, the shared goal of doing everything we can to improve the health care, benefits, services for veterans, their families, and survivors. All of us at VA are grateful for the commitment and sustained support of Congress in both resources and legislative authorities. Your support enables us to accomplish our mission. Everything we do at VA is built on a foundation of trust. The trust of veterans and their families, the trust of the American people and their elected representatives who provide the resources essential to our mission. We earn that trust 250,000 times every day by delivering on our promise to care for those who shall have borne the battle. We also earn that trust by being good stewards of the resources that we are given, and that includes providing accurate and timely information to those who provide VA resources. Anything that erodes that trust does tangible harm to veterans. I believe the status quo in our working relationship can improve. This is not a VA Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs issue. It's not a Veterans Health Administration issue or a Veteran Benefits Administration issue. It is a department issue. It is a VA issue. That's why I'm here. And that's why I pledge to do our part to improve how VA provides information to this committee and seek to work with you in a straightforward, collaborative, and constructive manner. I believe that's what veterans expect, and I know it's what they deserve. VA currently provides the committee and other members of Congress a remarkable volume of information that was noted in some of the opening statements. Since the last hearing on this subject in September of 2013, our on-time performance for delivering testimony and questions for the record is approaching 100%. But we know we must work to improve the on-time delivery of correspondence and other requests for information, and we are aggressively working to do that. I ask for this committee's positive support and constructive engagement in that process. To reiterate, VA and Congress share the same goal: to best serve veterans, their families, and survivors. We respect Congress's important oversight role and pledge to continue to work collaboratively and cooperatively with you. When we work in that way together, I believe veterans are best served. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear here today and for your continued support of veterans. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We'll start off with one round of questions, and then if we need to go to a second round, we'll do that as well. Secretary Gibson, one of the key committee concerns is about the safety of the VA employees and the veterans who are receiving care at VA facilities across the country. No one, whether they're an employee or a veteran, should fear for their lives at a VA facility. But that's not the case, unfortunately. Let me give you a couple of examples of safety-related requests that we have made and are waiting on the department to reply. The first is in regards to the employment of a registered sex offender in the Women's Health Unit at the Lebanon, PA Medical Center. Representative Jim Gerlach had first raised the issue in a letter to the Secretary requesting information. He has received no response. I sent a letter to the Secretary dated December 20th, 2013, requesting all information related to the hiring and assignments as well as compliance with OPM hiring guidelines and background checks. To date, no reply. The second issue involves the death of a patient at the Alexandria VA Medical Center in Louisiana following an altercation with an employee of the medical center. Again, in a December 12th letter to the Secretary, I requested all information related to the incident, including security system products and employee records. To date, Mr. Secretary, no response. When can this committee expect that VA will provide the data that we have requested regarding these two cases?
Mr. Chairman, the safety and security of both patients and employees, staff at VA installations across the country is of paramount concern to us. In these particular instances, I am not familiar with the facts of the case, but I commit to you that we'll provide a status report on those promptly. I note that Secretary Mooney, that you referred to earlier, is on the Hill every single week, oftentimes multiple times a week. She has standing visits on Fridays with members of the staff, and she would be delighted to visit with members of your staff or with you, sir, or I would be delighted to visit with you, sir, to discuss the status of the item.
I do note that Secretary Mooney is not, at least in the Cannon building today. She may be on the Hill every other day, but she's not here today.
Yes, sir.
And this is in the Trials and Transparency website that we have posted. So all of this information, and this goes back to what I was saying in the middle of my opening statement. She knew that we wanted to get into the weeds on specific questions, and then shortly before this hearing, we get an email from her saying you are not prepared to talk and specifics only at the 30,000-foot level. And again, that's just not acceptable. One of the most alarming trends that I see with the committee's current outstanding deliverables list is the multiple outstanding requests regarding mental health care. You mentioned the tragic incident at Fort Hood yesterday where there appears to be a mental health component, albeit DOD, but mental health all the same. There are numerous requests from our Oversight Subcommittee and our Health Subcommittee regarding a mental health provider survey. I understand that requests for this survey, which include data analysis as well as responses to open-ended questions, have been echoed in multiple oversight forums, including committee hearings and staff briefings, and by both this committee and our counterparts in the Senate. Again, why is it taking so long to get questions answered on this vital issue? And if you're not prepared to respond to that particular question, will you commit to providing me with a survey and its results by close of business today, and if not, why?
Mr. Chairman, I recall over the past 5 years from time to time I would be asked if there was anything that kept me awake at night, and my consistent response to that question was my concern about our collective ability to meet the mental health needs of service members, veterans, and their families. This is not only a personal priority for me, it is also a priority for the department. I am aware that in the case of this particular request that there's been substantial information provided. I believe there have also been briefings provided to some of the staff. We would be delighted to come provide a briefing to you, sir, at your convenience.
Thank you. My time's expired. Mr. Michaud.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And once again, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for being here. And since we had the last discussion and my previous conversations with the Secretary about how can we improve the relationships between the VA and this committee, and we hear over and over again the number of requests that the department gets from members of Congress, which I understand there's quite a few. So in order to speed up that process, we said, well, rather than writing our request, let's have an informal discussion, and that gets back to us meeting with subject matter, experts that actually want to talk to the committee, but that is still a problem, because the fact of the matter is we still have to wait anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks from OCLA given the approval for subject matter experts to talk to us. So that is a frustration. So would you please, describe to me your operational perspective on how the VA subject matter experts could and should interact with Congress?
Congressman, thanks for the question. You brought the issue up the other day when we visited. We think it's very important to be able to get timely information to members of this committee for you to exercise your oversight responsibilities. You offered this particular mechanism as a great example of ways that we can work collaboratively, where the opportunity exists to provide a briefing as opposed to responding to a formal request. And my experience, my sense is that when we do that, we oftentimes hit the nail on the head, and we're able to do it much more quickly. Those should happen promptly. And I know in the instance that you have referred to, it's pretty clear to me that we did not meet that standard. We've done so far in the first 6 months of this year 217 briefings on the Hill. Every single one of those briefings is done by a subject matter expert. So you're right. They're delighted to come visit. We're delighted to have them come visit. And I commit to you that we'll do our best to make the responsiveness what it ought to be.
What role do you think OCLA has in that? I can understand during the campaign the president wanted to keep his message focused, and therefore departments were kind of restricted what they could do during an election year, but now is the time to govern. And I think that message, as far as the department, where the department goes, it should be consistent. And part of the problem, quite frankly, is OCLA having to be the filter, and that's what the delay is, from 6 to 8 weeks in having us be able to do it. The reason why I gave the example with the Army folks is that's how DOD does it. I mean, within a week, They had several meetings, several email discussions. Anytime you put a stopper in there where you have to get approval, particularly through OCLA, it slows down that process, and we want to make sure that we can have that ongoing conversation. That's one of the reasons why we agreed to have these informal discussions with the subject matter experts, but that it still is a problem. So what role do you think OCLA has to be involved in this whole process as a filter versus as a facilitator, which we're trying to do is facilitate?
I think you just answered your own question. It is as a facilitator. When there's interest in a particular topic, there's a need for members of this committee and other members of Congress to be able to plug in somewhere within the organization, and frankly, that I believe that ought to be within the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs. Part of my responsibility in all of this is to make sure that if we've got bottlenecks within our own internal process, that we eliminate those bottlenecks. And so that's an opportunity for us to manage that. As I've mentioned, these subject matter experts enjoy the opportunity to come over and visit with members and visit with staff. And I commit to you that we'll work to make that a more responsive process.
I appreciate that very much, because I remember when I was first on this committee, actually I got a directory of all the staff over at the Department of Veterans Administration, their phone numbers. So if I ever had a question, rather than go through OCLA or the undersecretaries, we were able to actually, because a lot of times these questions could be answered very quickly. When I became ranking member, I said, well, geez, I haven't had a directory, and they said, well, they don't have them, which I know that, quite frankly, you must have a directory of all the VA. I can understand you don't want people calling in all the time, but it is problematic, particularly if OCLA feels that they have to be the filter, and I agree 100%. I'm glad you mentioned about the fact that they should be a facilitator, because that's the role that they should be, and that will help eliminate, I believe, some of the frustrations that we have over here on our side on that. So once again, thank you very much for your response. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. The Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. Bilirakis, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir, for your testimony. What do you think needs to happen moving forward to have 100% QFRs and 100% of testimonies submitted on time? More funding, more staffing, better management of the current resources? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, Congressman, I may not have misunderstood the question exactly. In the case of timely submission of testimony, this fiscal year we are delivering on time 96% of the time. And
why isn't it 100% of the time?
Sir, we were late 15 minutes with one piece of testimony for the 33 hearings that we've testified at this year. So our goal is 100%, and that's what we're aiming for, and we're at 100% in timely submission of QFRs. And the opportunity, frankly, is for us to extend that kind of excellent performance to other categories.
I want to move on to the next question.
Yes, sir.
Limited time. Do you process inquiries in the order they are received, or are they prioritized in any way?
In the process of trying to respond, just in the first 6 months of this year, we've responded to 2,675 inquiries from Congress. So orchestrating those responses is a challenge when you look at all the different categories of response. Normally, particularly as it relates to executive correspondence, the correspondence from the chairman and from the ranking member is a category of correspondence that we put very high in the priority, and we try to turn those around very quickly whenever possible. For correspondence, executive correspondence coming from members, the goal is to respond within 30 days. There are occasions when we should meet that standard, and I don't believe that we are. There are other occasions where the nature of the request is such that it's pretty clear fairly early on that it's going to take more than 30 days to respond. And I think what we owe the members of the committee and the staff is that we pick up the phone or send an email and we work out a time frame that makes sense for us to be able to provide a timely and complete response.
All right, thank you. Yes or no, did you know that the average number of days of all requests pending are 143 days? I know it was mentioned here in the committee. Why 143 days? Why that long? I just don't understand.
Congressman, I'm not, are you referring to the number of days pending for the 96 items on Chairman Miller's list? I'm not sure the...
Well, in other words, the average number of days, all requests pending, 143 days. That's my understanding. The committee says an average of 143 days for all inquiries pending.
Congressman, I understand the frustration here. I am taking ownership and committing to improve response times.
Maybe the 96 currently on the list.
Okay.
Address that issue.
Yes, sir. I would tell you in the course of responding, say, for example, to the more than 2,600 inquiries that we've received this year, or the more than 8,600 that we've responded to over the last 18 months, many of those responses are turned around very quickly, very much within that 2-week or that 30-day standard.
Well, thank you. Let me move on to the next question.
Yes, sir.
Did you know that there were 50 inquiries over 3 months pending? And why?
Where I was going with the other answer, I'm gonna kind of keep going with this answer. There are occasions where we receive, and many of the requests are the kinds of requests that we're able to respond to very timely within that 2-week or within that 30-day time frame. But there are requests that we receive that, by the nature of the request, the complexity of the request, will require extensive gathering of data, extensive analysis of the data, and review of the data to ensure that we're providing the right information to respond to the question.
Okay,
and those are of necessity going to require longer.
Thank you. Next question. Yes or no, are you aware that there are 66 inquiries over 2 months pending? I mean, in my opinion, it's inexcusable. We need this information timely to do our job.
Congressman, I understand that need, and we are committed to providing timely information. And where we're able to respond to a request within the goal standards that we set, we do that. But there are requests that we receive that there's just simply no way that within a 2-week or a 30-day period of time that we're going to be able to provide an adequate response. And as a result of that, part of what needs to happen, part of the collaboration that I think we need to work toward, is that we have the kind of robust communication that Ranking Member Michaud was referring to earlier, that where we're talking through this, we understand that the scope of the request is such that it's going to require this extensive time and effort to gather. There may be things that the member is willing to do to tailor the request a little bit, still accomplishing the underlying intent that would allow us to deliver it more quickly, or alternatively, that there may be a little bit of relief in terms of the deadline and the expectation for a timely response.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to give the other members an opportunity. Appreciate it. Thanks for holding the hearing as well.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. You're recognized for 5 minutes, and I do want to compliment you on your attire today.
Go Gator. But welcome, welcome, Mr. Gibson, to the House of Representatives.
Thank you, ma'am.
I know that the chairman is not going to be happy, or the ranking member, that they recognize me, because I really am a little confused why we're having this hearing today. We just had a hearing 6 months ago. I don't find the department politics, and when does the politics end and the service begin? I'm hoping service is all the time, because our role is to make sure that we're serving the veterans. And I would like to have a hearing on mental health, and what are we doing as far as partnering with some local communities, because those services are already there. And then maybe VA should do more oversight because of the volume of the amount of work. And then there are certain instances, for example, when we're talking about someone that's gotten killed, it's some legal ramifications for you to come up here and say something to us when we may be in court on those issues. So how can, and the volume, I mean, it's not just this committee, it's the Senate, it's government oversight, so you get thousands of requests. And so how do we deal with all of that? And who gets the priority? I want to say the priority should be the veterans. So you can respond to me.
Yes, ma'am. As I mentioned in my opening statement, I think the vast shared common ground that we have here is our interest in ensuring that veterans are best served. I think when we can build and maintain positive, constructive, collaborative relationships between committees and the department, that's the environment where the best outcomes are going to result, where veterans are going to be best served. And I am prepared, I am owning issues surrounding opportunities for improving responsiveness, because I understand that that's important to the committee. I'm going to make it important to me, and it's important to the department. But collaboration really involves two parties, and so being able to work together collaboratively, as Ranking Member Michaud outlined earlier, I think is a very positive step for veterans.
Yes. Can you tell us the volume of requests that you've gotten from Congress?
I can tell you the number that we have responded to. In the first 6 months of this year, 2,675. In the last 18 months, just over 8,600 requests.
And how many, what's the staffing that you have to respond to this 8,600?
Well, ma'am, because we want to provide the best information that we possibly can, accurate information and complete information, in the vast majority of instances, a large portion of the response winds up being originally created inside the Veterans Health Administration, inside the Veterans Benefit Administration, inside the National Cemetery Administration, by people that are actually charged with serving and caring for veterans on a day in and day out basis. So that workload gets distributed broadly across the organization, but then managed on a more central basis. It would be impossible for me to even guess at the number of people that are involved in, or the number of man hours that are involved in responding to all of those requests.
I guess my question is, do they have any responsibility other than responding to Congress?
Oh, yes, ma'am. In fact, the majority of people that participate in developing responses to Congress are people that have direct responsibility for serving veterans. Okay. They're people inside the administrations, because 9 times out of 10, the questions we receive are questions about service to veterans, as they well should be. And so these are people very often that have direct responsibility in that area, and to the extent that they are spending time, and it's important to provide the appropriate information timely. It's important for us to provide that information to this committee and to other committees of Congress. That's how veterans are best served, when we work together in that kind of way.
And I've got to say that you all have been very responsive to me. Just yesterday, the head judge from Duval County was here. I wanted them to have a quick meeting with someone from the VA, because we have the Veterans Court, and it is working really well, and we have the Mental Health Court, and we're talking about what we could do to expand this program. So, you know, I personally will give you all a response. I know we need to work together to improve the service for veterans. Thank you very much, and I yield back my time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for the committee's information. The Office of Legislative Affairs since 2009 has increased 30% in regards to their ability to do their work as it relates to the requests that have been made. Dr. Rowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, and thank you for taking some time to come by my office.
Great to see you, sir.
Hearing, and thank you for the service, your service to our country too. And I appreciate your forthrightness in being able to get this information to us in a timely fashion. And as Mr. Michaud said, one of the frustrations I've had here, and many members here, I actually read this stuff. And I can't read it if I get a Sears and Roebuck catalog the night before,
yes,
and make any sense out of it. So being timely, and I say this tongue-in-cheek, but I here in Washington, I don't think anybody ever got a term paper done on time. And we know when these hearings are going to be, and it would be nice to get this information and that you're getting it to us. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
And I hope that continues, where we get it a day or two ahead, where we can actually go through it and get something meaningful out of the,
yes, sir,
out of the hearing. And to another comment that Mr. Michaud made, well, you know, he didn't want to call the office. Well, people call his office all the time. and he mentioned exactly what happened. I have a staff of 7 people here because of the cutbacks, and we're making it work. And a lady Sunday at church pulled me over aside about an issue that I wasn't aware of. We've put some information out to the Secretary of Labor. We've called the two appropriate organizations and her. I didn't get her this morning, but I left her a message. That's timely, and I was a little ashamed. It was 3 days to get back and get her the information she needed. We need this information to be able to carry out our jobs.
Yes,
we
sir.
cannot do it without it, and I think the VA has the personnel to do what you need to do. And look, if something, as Mr. Bilirakis said, is going to take, you mentioned some of these issues are very complicated, you could somebody could send a letter in 2 weeks and say, look, this is a very complicated issue, we've looked this far, in 3 paragraphs. I don't need the Sermon on the Mount, I just need a Cliff Notes version of what you're doing so that I know you haven't forgotten me, because I think it's rude and arrogant when you do that. I think when you ignore a request, it means that either it isn't important to you or you don't think it's important to me. And I wouldn't be making that request if it weren't. So I would suggest you do that, send out an interim letter or some information so that we know that you haven't just buried us and forgotten about it, because we have thousands of issues we deal with every day, and we don't have 300,000 employees as the VA does. So just a comment on that, and I think those are a few little things you could do for me personally if I write you a letter, and it may take you 90 days to get the information back. I understand that. And I also understand I don't know. That's a perfectly good answer too. I've said that many times in my career when I didn't know something, I don't know the answer to it. But we'll get back to you, but don't say that and then never get back to me. I think that's okay, not knowing the answer. If I ask you a question or if you ask me one, I don't know, I will get back to you. So that's just a comment. I'm going to actually have no other comments. Just want to yield back my time.
If I could just say, sir, what you've just outlined is perfectly reasonable. That is a perfectly reasonable expectation, and it's what we should be doing routinely.
Ms. Brownlee, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Gibson, for testifying here today, and congratulations on your recent appointment and confirmation.
Thank you.
And I know, as you know, you have been trusted, as all of us on the committee have been, with a great task and very important task of serving our nation's veterans. And I am looking forward to working with you to ensure the needs are properly met in a timely manner and also in a qualitative manner as well. And I also want to thank you for our meeting yesterday.
Yes, ma'am.
And your attention to my district, where the wait time exceeds 44 days for mental health services. So I really do appreciate that very, very much. I wanted to ask really 2 questions. One specifically on the Congressional Legislative Affairs Office and the fact that in 2013, as you stated, we've made great improvements based on the data. And if you could just comment, what's changed? Why is it better? What has happened? And then secondarily, in your testimony, when you state that it's not a Veteran Health Administration problem or a Veterans Benefit Administration problem, it's a department issue. I know that you've only been with us here for 6 short weeks, but if you could, with fresh eyes, share with the committee what you think needs to be changed on a department-wide basis to be more customer-friendly and more service-oriented, what changes, larger changes you see. So if you could speak specifically to the Congressional and Legislative Affairs Office and speak more broadly on the department.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. First, I would say that I think recognizing the importance of timely communication with this committee and, frankly, with other committees and other members of Congress, and supported by the encouragement from the chairman and from this committee, I think A lot of additional attention was focused on specifically areas of timely receipt of testimony and timely delivery of responses to questions for the record. And I think that very intensive focus is what allowed that progress to be demonstrated. Within the department, it's a large and a complex organization. And so as you kind of alluding to earlier, that there are different parts of the organization that get involved in different kinds of ways. Ranking member mentioned earlier that the process of review, and so as I wade into this space, my sense is there are opportunities for us to streamline the review process. I think there are perhaps some opportunities for us to establish interim milestones along the way when we've got a relatively more complex item that we know we're going to have to respond to. And then as we discussed a moment ago, the need for this routine and robust communication so that we understand, we're acknowledging that we've not only we've gotten the item, but we're working on the item. Here's how we think things are coming. And I would reiterate again that the staff of the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs is on the Hill every week, and they're always willing to provide an update to a member of your staff or to a member on any particular item. And so I think it's creating more of an end-to-end process and creating more visibility about how we're doing at each step along the way, which will allow us to identify the bottlenecks that we were talking about earlier.
Well, thank you for that. And I mean, if there's anything more specific, other than in terms of the Legislative Affairs Office, you're saying just more focus, more attention to responsiveness and timeliness has made the difference in terms of the data in 2013. But is there anything more than that specifically has changed, or it's just that sort of direction and focus?
I think there's more horsepower pushing this locomotive, and that's one of the reasons that I'm here. We're very focused on this. This is important. This relationship is not just important to us at VA, it's important to veterans, because veterans get best served when we're working together constructively. So we understand that. We understand that we're not meeting the expectation and that we've got work to do. And so there's a lot more horsepower pushing the engine on this issue inside the department.
Thank you, sir. I yield
Yes,
back.
ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Runyon. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and Deputy Secretary Gibson, thank you for your service and your testimony. Kind of going back to what you were just talking about, and you used the phrase horsepower. Mm-hmm. And thank you for the meeting we had yesterday. And I know you, Secretary Shinseki, all the time talk about accountability. Well, I want to put this out here and give a couple examples of it. With accountability, you have to parallel that with consequences. And I've asked this question many times to many different undersecretaries in the thing. A lot of times, what are the consequences? As we sit up here as elected members, everybody on this dais has consequences of them not executing their job. It's called an election. Our veterans have consequences of not executing their job in the field. It's the lives of their comrades around them. I did the same thing when I played in the NFL. The consequence of not doing your job, you lost your job at the end of the day. Are there formal structures, formal procedures that you have throughout your leadership model to hold people accountable? We talk about accountability, but truly who's being held accountable, and what are the processes and procedures to do that within your model?
First of all, I would say, Congressman, one of the things that's really struck me about my first 6 weeks in the department is the passion that people have for the mission that we do, their determination to do the right thing, and the fact that they're working very, very hard to accomplish that mission. At VA, and I would say in any organization, the thought process begins with ensuring that clear standards are established, and then the leader's job is to make sure that the skills and the other resources associated with being able to meet that standard are available. And so when there are performance issues that arise in the wake of that kind of good foundation, then you start a process of constructive engagement where you're trying to understand where the issues are. I would tell you from my own private sector experience, my experience inside VA is obviously very limited at this point, but in my private sector experience, rarely did that result in a firing, in a removal from a position, because you work with somebody, oftentimes the performance improved. In other instances, you would work with someone and they would self-select out. They would retire, they would resign, they would step down to a position that's perhaps less challenging and within the scope of their ability. Rarely in the private sector does it result in firing someone. And so I know the Secretary has said on numerous occasions that he believes that he's got the authority that he needs to hold people accountable. I would tell you there are elaborate performance measures in place across the organization that people are expected to meet, and I believe there is a strong system of accountability in place.
I thank you for the response, and I think what you're touching on there, it kind of comes back to a phrase you used yesterday in our meeting, and talking about relationships. When you have a close personal connection to those around you, and I think, as the chairman and the ranking member have said, sometimes we don't have these relationships. We don't have a personal connection a lot of times to the people we need the information from. There's barriers in there. That personal relationship has accountability to it.
Yes,
because they feel like they're letting people down. And that's the structure of a team. We're all on a team here to serve our veterans. I think these are the barriers, and I think you addressed it in our meeting yesterday. We have to get there, though. And those accountability measures, I think, can be reached through more open dialogue and better relationships in the long run.
Well, if there's any mistaking here, let me clarify it. I'm the accountable guy. And so I believe in the importance of those relationships. And believe me, as I walk out the door today, when we're finished, that starts the work, that doesn't finish the work. Because I am accountable back to you and every other member of this committee.
Thank you, and Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I apologize. I'm going to have to leave in just a minute, but I want to ask specifically, since we're talking about transparency and accountability, and I think that it's very, very important that we discuss it. And are you familiar with the report that NBC here in Washington just did about a VA employee that was involved in an incident, left, and then was hired back? I think the employee's name was Fillingham. Are you familiar with that?
Mr. Chairman, I have read one news account of associated with that, and that is the full extent of my knowledge of.
Let me just, if I can, give you a little background, if
yes,
members will indulge the chair for just a minute. And in fact, Mr. Kaufman, who chairs the Oversight and Investigative Subcommittee, sent a letter to the Secretary on December 20th of 2013, and it was requesting Mr. Fillingham's personnel file. And in the letter, I also asked that the request not be treated the same as a FOIA or Freedom of Information Act request from the general public. We haven't gotten a response. So the question is, why in the world would Mr. Kaufman's letter go unresponded to when a Freedom of Information Act by a news organization was responded to weeks ago? And since we don't have a response from the VA on Mr. Kaufman's letter, I'm going to take this opportunity to ask you a couple questions and maybe fill you in. The media reports that the police and federal investigators found that Fillingham drove a government vehicle after drinking with two fellow VA employees. One of Fillingham's colleagues fell out of the truck while it was moving, and that employee died. According to media reports, VA records show that Fillingham was later allowed to resign from VA, but was rehired by the department just months later while he's still under federal investigation, and the media reports at a salary of $100,000. So the question is, why isn't drinking and driving a government vehicle on VA business a fireable offense? Why would VA rehire an employee still under investigation for misconduct? Who decided to rehire Jed Fillingham? Why did they rehire him? And what is VA currently doing in response to this incident? And I only ask the question because we've waited since the latter part of December for an answer, and you're who we have to ask.
Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned in response to an earlier question, safety of staff and patients and veterans that we care for is a paramount importance to the department. Also, as I mentioned, I am unfamiliar with the specifics surrounding this particular item. Any response is going to be nothing more than speculation on my part. I would like to have the opportunity to respond back to you.
If I was the deputy secretary, I certainly would expect that somebody is probably watching this testimony now, either on television or webcast, that they would probably have an answer for you when you got back to the central office. So I would hope that we could very quickly have an opportunity to discuss what's going on, because the facts as they've been presented in the press are more than egregious. And I think not only do the taxpayers are they owed an explanation, but certainly the members of this committee are, and I will take you at your word that you will respond as quickly as possible once you get briefed up. It's a pretty bad incident. Pretty bad incident. Next, Ms. Kirkpatrick is gone. Mr. O'Rourke is gone. That would be Mr. Waltz. Well, first of all, how'd you get up there? You were down here.
I know. They had me walk down there first, and then I came back up as a little shaming or something. Okay. I'm not sure what was going on.
Mr. Waltz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. And Deputy Secretary, thank you. And in listening to this, I'm very appreciative. I'm appreciative of listening to all the meetings you had with members. I know it's a challenging job, but as a graduate of West Point, an airborne ranger, and son of a B-17 tail gunner and grandson of a soldier who fought at the Marne, your family's used to tough things. And so I appreciate your candidness on this. I think you hear the frustration maybe on both sides of the aisle a little bit. And I understand, and we're looking at this. You are clearly speaking the language of everybody in this committee, that we're a team together, but we need to work as a team to make that happen. My suggestion, if it would be, and it's not necessarily a question, is a lot of these things can be started on the front end. One of the things we do is we never introduce legislation or try and do change or anything like that unless we built the coalition of the VSOs, our constituents across the board. But I have to tell you, the one piece that's kind of missing, and I don't know if it's the nature of the legislative versus the administrative, executive side of things, we always feel like there's a bit of resistance. And when I say that is if we send a suggestion over for a bill, we want candid input. And what we end up getting, and members would know this too, sometimes you have a standard form letter, but we joke in our office, if I sent a bill over recognizing today was Thursday, there would be lots of red flags coming up from VA of why that's not a thing that we can be with. And it's that type of thing that I think then is corrosive and leads to this long drawn out process where, and I don't, certainly I think the point was made, we don't want to put you in a tough position, have you testifying under oath on things where that is, but it's the partnership in this of working from the beginning of an issue collaboratively together. And you mentioned yesterday, which I was very appreciative, Deputy Secretary, was this issue of creating some more informal means of talking and collaborating that are trust amongst folks who are entrusted with our nation's veterans. Maybe elaborate a little bit of ways that we could do that, because I understand there's rules, there's regulations, there's open meetings, there's all those things, but sometimes all we're looking for is some informal feedback. You think this is a good idea, what does this actually mean? And what members hear is I'll wait 6 months to get a canned answer that I knew I was going to already get. So it's the content of the answer, not just the time, that matters too.
Right. Congressman, you're hitting the nail on the head right here in terms of the kind of collaborative relationship that best serves veterans. I think those kinds of informal contact in any relationship. The ability to have regular, candid communication is one of the vital ways that you feed a relationship and that a relationship grows. I think that's an opportunity for VA and this committee, and I will look forward to pursuing those kinds of opportunities personally and to making staff.
Well, I think it builds trust is that, we're not calling over to trap somebody into saying something, just running something by them. What do you think about this bill on speeding the backlog? Do you really think it would help? And if we could get a candid, trusted response back that impacts how we go about it or what we can get done, that would be incredibly helpful to me. And I think it would reduce your workload on this, and I would argue would build stronger relationships and better legislation. So
it's about finding ways to move forward together for veterans.
And again, I would be remiss if I wouldn't, as the co-chair with Chairman Miller of the co-chair of the USO caucus, to thank you for your dedication when you were over at USO. It was bittersweet. I'm glad you came over here, but I did not want to see you leave over there because that is an important organization that you made even better. So thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Hillscamp, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a few questions, and I think my colleague from New Jersey used the word that's most critical here, and that's accountability. And I have a few questions here, and I'd like to see if we can address those. And Deputy Secretary, there have been reported 19 preventable deaths nationwide, including 6 at the Columbia, South Carolina Center, 3 at the Augusta Medical Center due to delays in VA care. As I understand it, VA has refused to reveal the locations of the other 10 deceased veterans where they were seeking care. Can you tell us the specific locations today for the other 10 deceased veterans where they were seeking care?
Congressman, anytime an adverse event occurs anywhere in VA and veterans are harmed, that is a very serious matter to us. There are extensive processes that we go through in VHA to investigate and to document and understand the circumstances surrounding those adverse events and to ensure that they don't occur elsewhere in the organization subsequently. I do not have particulars as it relates to those specific events. I would be glad to arrange for a member of the staff to brief your staff or to come by and brief you as well, sir.
Will you commit, though, to providing the information by the close of business day for the committee?
Sir, what I want to do is provide you the information that we can provide when we can provide it. And so I'm not familiar with the workings on the homework that's being done on that particular issue.
10 deceased veterans. The VA has refused to reveal those locations. I think our veterans deserve to know where there was a delay in care that led to a death of a veteran. And as I understand that, the VA has refused to release those locations. So I will ask you by the end of the day, we'll make another request. Would you please provide that to the committee? And I would appreciate that. Second issue deals with, again, ongoing issue with Pittsburgh and Legionnaire's disease. We had a hearing on that. As I understand that, 3 days after the VA's Inspector General reported the mismanagement of the VA Pittsburgh Center's response to the disease outbreak, the director at that center received a $63,000 bonus. VA officials repeatedly said his bonus was under review. Then they allowed the gentleman to retire. Did anyone actually review the bonus? What is the status of review, and when will it be completed? And I presume you don't know anything about this situation either, but I would appreciate a response to the committee on that particular issue. There's ongoing bonus issue, and I would also like to know how many members of the senior executive service in the past year received a bonus from the VA. Last one, 2 issues that are related to specifically to responses. March of 2013 last year, Mike's office received official confirmation from the VA that an outpatient clinic in Liberal, Kansas would receive a physician. Last week, I had an individual from that town was in my office and notified us that that never did happen. And so 13 months later, after we were told it was happening, we were told by a constituent that it never did happen. I'm just curious how the VA can give some information that turned out to be inaccurate, and And wouldn't you expect a notification back to our office that, Congressman, that didn't happen? There's still a vacancy, and you still have 3 years without a position in Liberal Kansas. Can you describe what should be the proper response and whether you would be informing me in the future when you don't follow through on a request that was...
Congressman, I would say in any kind of dialogue or conversation around an issue like that, when we've communicated information to a member and that information proves to be incorrect or the circumstances change, then we owe a follow-up conversation and communication to the member. That's part of building the kind of trusted relationship that needs to exist between the members of this committee and the department.
I appreciate that, and that did not happen. Again, Kansan had to catch us and say, the VA didn't tell you, but we're still waiting on a physician in Liberal Kansas. Further on, just outside my district, there's a Topeka VA center, and still trying to understand why the emergency room was closed at this center, the VA. And I received no notification. Again, heard about it at a town hall from a constituent. And it is hard to build trust when good information might be communicated, but these difficult situations and failures or delays in care and refusal to answer questions makes it very difficult to visit with my constituents and honestly tell them we're getting the full story from the VA. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Titus, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gibson, nice to see you. Thank you for taking time to join us this morning. I also want to thank you for your previous service at the USO and for working with me to get the facility at McCarran in Las Vegas. Every time I fly home, which about every weekend, I'm glad to see that USO is there.
Thank you, ma'am.
Absolutely. And as you outlined in your testimony, I know the VA receives an enormous amount of correspondence and requests. You may be one of the most micromanaged agencies in the executive department because we all have concerns and we all have constituents who are veterans. And I appreciate the offer that you've made to us in meetings and here today to work together better to provide accountability, to provide more information, because this committee could be your biggest cheerleader if we have that information, but we need to know what's working well and what's not working so we can try to help you to fix that. Just a couple of points of things that I've been concerned about, and I think you are aware of them, but I would just put them on the record again and hope to get more information down the road. One is the new Veterans Hospital in Las Vegas. It's a big, beautiful facility. We're very proud of it. Like any new facility, it's had growing pains, but I'm concerned that some of the things that are happening there, like with the emergency room, aren't taking into account some of veterans' input, some of the doctors' input. I hope that we can kind of be notified about changes and work together to make that transition better. I'd also want to ask you again, I've done this before to the VA about the interim disability ratings. I have a bill that's pay as you rate, so veterans can get some of their compensation as different parts of their cases are assessed. The VA can already do that, but they're not doing it. Only about 8% of the cases have been allowed to have that interim payment, but I haven't gotten a good answer of why that's the case or why that's a problem or how we can work better on that.
Yes, ma'am.
That's passed the House, and so we're going to see where it's going in the Senate, but if I know what your concerns are or how you could make it happen without the legislation, let me know.
Yes,
and then finally, I've been very concerned and very vocal about the performance of the Reno Regional Office. It has one of the worst records, one of the longest backlogs, some of the troubled personnel. I've talked about this many times. They've brokered half of their cases. So they brought down their backlog, but it's by sending half of their cases to other places. And we hear from the VSOs and from individual veterans that they can't now track it, that there's a lack of communication on these brokered cases. So if there's some way we can look at a communication plan that includes all the stakeholders, I think there'll be a lot more confidence in the fact that their cases are being sent somewhere else, and those that are left at the regional office are going to be addressed in a way that's appropriate. It's not that you're just getting rid of cases, you're solving the problem as well. So those are areas that I'm working on. I appreciate your input and your help on this, and I thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am. Understand.
I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Gibson, for being here today. I want to tell you, after hearing your testimony today, I can't tell you how disappointed I am. I think you're dedicated to not making a difference. Because for you to come before this committee and conflate the numbers that come, the correspondence that comes from all congressional offices about questions about individual VA cases that usually stem from the district level, without breaking out the numbers that come from this office that are based on our oversight responsibilities, I think it's stunning. And I think that tells me is what we're going to get out of your leadership or lack thereof is just more of the same. More of the same, that you're dedicated to making sure that things don't change. You ought to be outraged. You ought to be outraged at the length of time it takes for VA to respond to the members of this committee on their oversight role. Look, we had a hearing on February 13th of last year, and I asked Dr. Petzel, who was testifying before this committee on mental health issues, that he had mentioned a survey that was completed 4 weeks prior to his testimony about it was VA providers, what VA providers are saying about the work being done related to mental health care. And I asked for that. And he said he would have it to me close of business that day. I have not received it yet. And that's typical. That's not unusual. That's typical. And for you to come before this committee and say, everything's really fine, I'm just going to make it a little bit better? Really? Just a little bit better? I mean, come on. I just can't tell you how disappointed I am. And I just think that maybe that's how you see your job description. Keeping information away from this committee, not giving us information, not transparency. Not transparency on behalf of the veterans that have served this country, on behalf of the taxpayers that foot the bill. I yield back.
Okay, Ms. Negrete McLeod, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I have no questions. However, I would like to say I'd like to thank the department for handling quite a few things on my behalf. And just recently, I called last week during our week that we were home. I had a veteran that had come in who felt that there was not attention given to the PTSD arena, and he had some problems. And I called when I came back last week. And they quickly responded to him. They called him and wanted to know if they could help him in any way and try to get an appointment quicker than he was having one over in Loma Linda. And so I just want to thank you, and thank you for coming, testifying before us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the feedback.
Dr. Winstrom, you're recognized for 5 minutes. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sloan, I want to say thank you for your service to our country, and I am hopeful with you being here. I have worked with you on USO events in Cincinnati and have been nothing but impressed with the work that you have done there. And we've had some pretty successful events, and it's been a pleasure to work with you there. Obviously, we all have concerns. We all know that there are problems within the VA and in the communication with us a lot of times. And I've come to find in the years so that I've been here that sometimes people within the VA don't know what they don't know. For example, on the healthcare side, we had a committee of doctors here, and I asked the doctors if any of them have ever been in the private sector in managing hospital systems. And they haven't. So they've been in a system, they've been in academia, you know, where they're salaried. They don't have to make ends meet necessarily. That's not an issue. And as a doctor in the Army, I've served in DOD facilities where I know the inefficiencies there. Not that the care is bad, but the fact that I can only see 15 patients in a DOD facility, where in my private practice I'd see 45 to 50 in the same amount of time. These are the types of things that the people that are running, I think, they don't know that. They've never been that. And for the last year, I've offered to go into the hospitals, into the clinics, into the ORs, and talk about what could be done to improve things. And when we had a hearing recently, I asked, can you tell me how many, for example, patients in an 8-hour day in the clinic an orthopedic surgeon sees? And they said, we have no idea. So well, then what are you measuring? And this was the doctor trying to evaluate the efficiency. I said, what are you measuring? We're making some headway on that. We're going to get some time, and hopefully we can make a difference there. I'm here. I want to be part of solutions, not just complain. But at the same time, we had a breakfast 5 weeks ago, and I hand-delivered a letter to General Shinseki asking about the prescription drug monitoring program that we have one in Ohio where we share information amongst the medical professionals, amongst doctors, to know who's getting what narcotics and where, so that we're not over-prescribing, or that we tend to try and help someone rather than continue to prescribe unnecessarily. The VA is able to get that information from the private sector in Ohio, but the private sector can't get it from the VA. And I asked, why are we still behind? I've received nothing back, and I hand-delivered that. And at the same time, I asked Dr. Petzold one time, he said, well, it's an IT problem. Well, why is it an IT problem? Because the funding has been there. So our doctors in Ohio cannot get that information. So here's a situation now, 5 weeks, you were at that breakfast, and I want to know why I haven't been heard from. I haven't heard anything.
Congressman, first of all, thank you for the willingness to engage positively, particularly in light of your background and experience and your professional training and credentials. It's a valuable resource to VA, and I'm grateful that you would be willing to do that. We owe you an answer. And I'll see that we get you a status update promptly.
I appreciate that, but that's the type of thing that everyone's talking about. And I know you haven't been on the job very long,
yes, sir.
And I recognize that it's a mountain to climb. And again, knowing you personally, I think that you're the man that can get that job done. But you've got a lot on your hands, and we'll pin some high hopes on you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? All right.
I have one. I have one.
You have a question? Okay.
Yes,
You're
I do.
recognized.
Yes. Thank you again for coming. But my question pertains to a couple of the members have said that they wanted something by the end of the day. And both of their issues sound like they were legal issues. How do you all handle a situation like that? If the case is in court or if it's under legal review, what kind of response could you give?
Well, I think the response, ma'am, will have to be shaped by the advice of counsel.
Yes.
Where there's outstanding litigation or where there are privacy issues associated either with patient matters or with employee matters, and so the response has to be shaped by that input. But we still owe a response.
Yeah, I agree. You owe a response, but the response may not be the in-depth detail as to what the person is asking, because basically if you give it to us, we'll read it in the press, and if it's a legal situation, then we're not on the oath.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. You're exactly right. But we owe you a response. That's part of building the kind of collaborative relationship we want to have. That's how we wind up working together to find ways to move forward. That's not just going back and forth. That's not constructive for me.
I agree. And relationships are two ways. And it's not just what we want. It's how we treat you, how we respond to you. It's a partnership. It's a marriage. It's what we're doing together for the veterans. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to recognize now the ranking member for whatever you'd like, question, statement, whatever, you make some comments, please. You're recognized, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I ask that Ms. Kirkpatrick's statement be included in the record. She had to leave earlier.
So moved.
Thank you. And once again, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Gibson. I'm impressed with your testimony. I know you've been at the department for a short time, but also knowing your previous history with USOs, that you're a good fit for the department, and open collaboration, communication, and honesty is extremely important for this committee for us to do our job, because I do know that even though some members haven't brought up some of the issues, that my staff get a lot of requests from members of this committee saying, well, why haven't we heard from OCLA yet? They come to us to complain about it. So I think that the more we can have that open communication, the better off that we all will be. And some of the frustrations you saw this morning from some members on both sides of the aisle, I think will help lower that frustration if we have that open, line of communications in ways we can speed up the process. And one way I thought, I mentioned my opening statement with the subject matter experts. I think that's one way to speed up the process. Still, we have a ways to go in that area. But look forward to working with you. And once again, thank you for your service and thanks for being here today. Appreciate it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And sir, again, I know you've only been on the job for 6 weeks. Appreciate your service to our country, what you've done for the USO and your service here. But I will tell you, we're very serious about this. We've got to see some improvement. The members are frustrated, and rightly so. Just like I agree with the ranking member. We've got to get some answers quickly. And again, the lack of communication is extremely frustrating. If you don't have the answer, or if you can't give the answer for legal reasons, get back to us. Let us know. We have to know that you're working on it. So again, we've got to be able to do our jobs, and when we don't get these responses in a timely manner, it's very difficult. It inhibits our ability to communicate to our constituents. So please, I implore you to make some improvements. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. You have the staffing, 30% increase since 2009. So let's get the job done. I appreciate you being here today, and thank you for your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, message received, and I look forward to being with you on the 12th of April then in Tampa to cut the ribbon.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks so much. If there are no further questions for Secretary Gibson, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material into the hearing record. Thank you. The hearing, with no objections, the hearing now stands adjourned. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.